The new Donkey Kong game is so good at being a 3D platformer that its primary gameplay hook isn't actually platforming at all. While you do jump on some platforms, that really isn't the main thrust of the gameplay. So is it truly a 3D platformer? Not only would I say yes, I would say it captures the spirit of that genre better than most by shifting its approach in some key ways. Now, to make sense of that, we need to explore a couple of important things. First, we're going to look at exactly what a 3D platformer is and how Nintendo has defined it throughout their history. Second, we will examine the recent entries in the Legend of Zelda series and how their design philosophies have played a significant role here. And finally, we'll tie it all together and explore how Donkey Kong Bananza has managed to solve the biggest challenge of the 3D platforming genre in a brand new way. You with me? Let's dive in. What is a 3D platformer? To answer that, we first have to define what a 2D platformer is. If you're watching this video, chances are I don't need to explain that to you. But what I am going to do is quickly delineate some terminology that will be useful later in the video. At their absolute core, 2D platformers are about traversal. It's all about getting from point A to point B. But just walking from point A to point B in a straight line is boring. However, if we add platforms, obstacles, and enemies, now the act of traversing the level is challenging and fun. So if that's what a 2D platformer is, then a 3D platformer is just the exact same thing, but in 3D, right? You're just traversing a level by jumping on platforms and overcoming obstacles and enemies in the third dimension. Simple. Except none of Nintendo's 3D platformers have ever been exclusively that. See, there's a fundamental problem when you attempt to go from 2D to 3D. 2D platformers are all about following a path, because you can carefully lay out obstacles and enemies along that path and craft a fun challenge. The moment you take a level and make it 3D, you're dealing with wide open space, and the platforming challenge largely evaporates. Now you're just running around freely. Whatever obstacles might be there can just be circumvented via the extra dimension. This takes us right back to the problem of traversal with no challenge. We are moving from point A to point B in 3D space without any real platforming challenge to overcome. But there's gotta be a solution here, right? All we need is a path with obstacles. So let's do this. Let's create a narrow path that floats in empty 3D space so the obstacles can't be circumvented. Welcome to Super Mario 64's Bowser Stages. If that game was a pure platformer and nothing else, all its levels would look more or less like this. But this causes a new problem. It doesn't really take advantage of the third dimension all that well. It honestly doesn't offer anything much different from its 2D counterpart, since you can only move backward or forward along a path. So maybe this game needs an additional gameplay hook. Let's go back to the big feature 3D has over 2D: wide open spaces. We've got to figure out a way other than platforming to make it fun to move freely around that open space. We'll call it exploration. And how do we encourage players to explore? Secrets and collectibles. But if we make the game only about exploring and collecting, it's not a platformer anymore. We have to keep that platforming intact somehow while balancing it with exploration. And so you have the great dichotomy of all 3D platformers. How much of the game should be platforming and how much should be exploration? How do we blend those together in a way that is cohesive? Every Nintendo 3D platformer has answered this question a little differently, and it's fascinating to watch the solutions evolve over the years. Let's start with Mario 64's solution. When they made that game, they said, let's make a linear path to a goal so we can create some simple platforming challenges, then surround that path with an open area full of secrets and collectibles for exploration. Bob-omb Battlefield is a single path up to a hilltop, surrounded by a large area you can freely explore. Womp's Fortress is the same thing. Lethal Lava Land is hilarious to me because if you cooled all the lava, the entire level is just a giant flat square. The lava allows them to introduce, you guessed it, a whole bunch of paths. This level is interesting because it allows you to freely explore and be forced down paths simultaneously. Very clever. Tall Mountain is one of the most linear levels since it's just a single long path that spirals up the outside of a mountain with secrets and collectibles placed at several points of interest along the way. Rainbow Ride is super fascinating because it's their 3D solution for auto-scrolling levels, and it works really well. In fact, I think all of these solutions work really well. Super Mario 64 is considered a masterpiece for a reason, but it doesn't change the fact that the game is not a pure platformer. It's offering both platforming and exploration, but rarely at the same time. So when Rare decided to take a crack at this same conundrum, they leaned heavily toward one of these two things. They swung the pendulum away from platforming and toward exploration. Like, all the way. Rare decided that instead of splitting the focus, platforming would be almost entirely off the table. Yes, I know it's in there a little, but by and large, Donkey Kong 64 is all about the exploration, the secrets, and the world record-setting number of collectibles. Whether you love it or hate it, you can't argue that this game knows exactly what it wants to be. It's kind of weird calling DK64 a 3D platformer, but because of its many similarities to Mario 64, which established exploration as part of the genre, it has remained in that category. Nintendo took a second stab at solving the 3D platformer conundrum with Super Mario Sunshine, and while it's very similar to Mario 64, it expands on the idea of the quintessential floating path in 3D space with the secret levels. It was a decent enough way to add more traditional focused platforming than Mario 64 had. But the next 3D Mario game is where things really get interesting. Nintendo also decided to swing the pendulum hard in one direction, except instead of swinging it toward exploration like Rare did, they swung it toward platforming, and the result was incredible. Among the many reasons people adore Galaxy is the fact that Nintendo finally decided to commit to the literal interpretation of 3D platformer. The game does still offer exploration through a handful of open areas, which do a great job of breaking up the monotony of the more linear levels, but by and large, it is all about platforming down linear paths. Replace the power stars with flagpoles, and you have an almost perfect 3D representation of a 2D Mario game. So there we go, they did it. Third time's a charm, 3D platforming has been perfected, twice, problem solved. But you know, it sure was fun to wander around those free open areas back in Sunshine and 64. I kinda wish Mario would bring that back. I know that isn't pure platforming, but I kinda don't care. It was fun. Why can't Nintendo perfectly combine the essence of Galaxy's platforming with the openness of 64 and Sunshine's exploration? What if there could be a 3D open area where no matter which way you decided to run, there would be some kind of platforming challenge? New Donk City is quite the achievement because it's the closest Nintendo has ever come to this idea. You can strike out in just about any direction, and there is some sort of platforming challenge waiting for you. But as amazing as it is, it's just one level. The rest of Odyssey does have phenomenal level design with plenty of baked-in platforming, but it takes a page from Sunshine's book and relegates the majority of its true platforming challenges to these little bonus areas. It's a great solution, but it still mostly divides the gameplay into two parts: platforming and exploration. It seems like these two ideas are just impossible to fully combine, at least across an entire game. But you know what? I'm okay with that. Odyssey is unbelievably fun and polished, so how could any game possibly improve on the genre? We'll come back to this in just a moment. But first, let's summarize briefly. 3D platformers can be very fun when they're purely about platforming down a set path, as Mario Galaxy proves. At the same time, 3D platformers are usually enhanced when exploration is added, so long as it's implemented well, as Mario 64, Sunshine, and Odyssey prove. No game that I'm aware of has ever been able to perfectly combine platforming and exploration into a seamless singular gameplay mechanic. You're typically either doing one or the other. New Donk City is the closest Nintendo ever came to blending these ideas. With those things in mind, we need to take a brief detour into the land of Hyrule. In 2014, during the reveal of the game that would become Breath of the Wild, Eiji Aonuma said something that would fundamentally change the future of Nintendo's game design forever. Listen to how he describes the way previous Zelda games were designed and contrasts that with his new game.
We had to design small, bounded areas with a defined entrance and exit, and putting them all together made it feel like you were playing in a large world. But you still couldn't cut through the boundaries wherever you like to explore that world. As soon as those boundaries are removed, it means you can enter any area from any direction. So the puzzle solving in this game begins the moment the player starts to think about where they want to go, how they will get there, and what they will do when they arrive. This is a clean break from the conventions of past games in the Zelda series, where you had to follow a set path and play through the scenario in the right order. I believe this departure will create opportunities for new gameplay that have not been experienced in previous Zelda games.
And that is exactly what happened. Fast forward 9 years from that day, and we have two genre-defining games that do just what Aonuma promised. As soon as these games let you out of their training areas, everything is fully up to you. Every goal can be accomplished in virtually any way imaginable, allowing for the most organic gameplay Nintendo has ever crafted. But you already knew about all that. In this video, I want to focus on a related but different aspect of these two games. It's likely that someone somewhere has already identified and discussed this concept, but for this video, I'm going to call it the funnel. The idea is this. In Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, the primary goal is defeating the final boss, and from the moment you leave the training area, you have the option to run straight toward that goal and complete it. The only thing stopping you is how thoroughly you want to complete the game's secondary goal of getting stronger. You basically play the game until you've decided you're strong enough, and then you go beat the final boss. The brilliance of these games is that no matter what you choose to do, every action funnels you toward that secondary goal of getting stronger. Let's focus on Tears of the Kingdom for this example. You want to complete a few shrines? Here's some orbs you can turn in to gain more health or stamina. You want to pursue a side quest or two? Here's a whole bunch of different rewards, like crafting materials to upgrade your armor or ingredients to cook meals with. Want to go fight some bad guys? Defeated enemies drop monster parts that can be fused to weapons, cooked into potions, or also used to upgrade armor. Even if you just wander aimlessly, you'll end up discovering and collecting a whole host of items and materials that work together to make you stronger bit by bit. The point is, you cannot go wrong. It's one of the primary reasons these games are so consistently satisfying to play. Everything you do moves you toward your goal. There are no wrong answers. When you pair this funneling system with the game's freedom to complete various goals in any order, you end up with a very engaging and rewarding game. Now comes the fun part. Let's take everything we've learned from Mario and everything we've learned from Zelda and tie it all together. Stepping back into the world of 3D platformers for just a moment, Donkey Kong Bananza is facing the same old dichotomy. How do you seamlessly combine platforming and exploration? Remember at the beginning when we talked about traversal and how platforming was the solution that made traversal fun and interesting? What if we took platforming as a method of traversal and replaced it with something else? As it turns out, if we replace platforming with digging, it solves not much actually, at least not by itself. Just the fact that DK can dig around is not a magic solution to the traversal problem. It still has to be made interesting and fun. So what do? We use Zelda's funnel system. Here's what I mean. DK Bananza is sort of like Tears of the Kingdom in that you don't really have to do anything except beeline towards the next main objective. You do have to move through the levels in order, but you don't have to collect anything. Your primary goal is just to complete each level's main objective and move on. You can literally roll credits on this game without collecting a single golden banana or fossil. So why collect them at all? Because of the secondary objective. The bananas and fossils can be used to make DK stronger. And here we have a functionally identical setup to Tears of the Kingdom. Want to collect golden bananas? Here are skill points you can use to enhance DK's strength and unlock all sorts of abilities. You want to hunt down fossils? Here are some outfits you can purchase with these fossils that give DK and Pauline all kinds of bonus effects. You want to just dig around aimlessly? Well, there are plenty of rewards for that as well. First of all, much like Tears of the Kingdom, the levels are designed in a way that something is always drawing your eye. There's almost always a point of interest or a suspicious-looking wall, but even if you don't see anything clearly drawing your attention, the sonar ability comes to your rescue. The majority of the time you use sonar, something useful shimmers nearby, encouraging you to dig toward it. And as you dig, you will discover random treasure chests quite frequently, which contain maps that will give you the locations of golden bananas and fossils. But sometimes these chests just contain a whole bunch of gold. Furthermore, every inch of dirt, rock, mud, or whatever else you're digging through is also packed with gold. And gold can be used at the shop to buy more maps, which help you find more bananas and more fossils. Just like Tears of the Kingdom, but to an even more refined degree, every action you take in Donkey Kong Bananza moves you one step closer to the same goal. And because of that level design and funneling system, traversal is fun and interesting. If you are digging in DK Bananza, then by default, you're also exploring. And if you're exploring, you're doing it by digging. Nintendo finally found a way to perfectly combine fun traversal with interesting exploration, and it's wonderful. Now, let's pause right here for a moment and clarify something important. I do not consider DK Bananza to have dethroned Mario Odyssey or anything like that. Super Mario Odyssey still stands tall as a masterpiece in gaming and an extremely high bar for 3D platformers. And honestly, lots of people prefer the feeling of Mario's acrobatics as opposed to DK's digging, and that is valid. While I do like DK Bananza more, it isn't by that much. I still absolutely adore Mario Odyssey and all the 3D Mario games, and I cannot wait to see what's next in that franchise. I just think it's incredible that after 29 years of trying all kinds of ideas, Nintendo was finally able to perfectly join traversal with exploration in a way that both are happening simultaneously and at equal levels of fun. The most exciting part is that they've only been designing games with this newer philosophy for a relatively brief time. I'm willing to bet they have many more ideas up their sleeve that use this philosophy, and I can't wait to see what they are. I also know that up your sleeve, you've got a comment or two, and I really want to hear it. One of the big reasons I'm here is because I love facilitating conversations, and you guys have always done a great job of continuing that conversation by giving me interesting things to think about and helping me learn things I didn't know. So go ahead and type out that comment. Maybe even click subscribe if you're feeling extra magnanimous. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your valuable time here with me. Until the next video, have a wonderful day.